Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of TalkFlow. This is episode 22. And as you can see from the title, in this episode, we're gonna be walking you guys through our Webflow process and the correct way of doing things.
Not
All the way
correct, maybe
from
not correct, but a better way of doing
a
things.
better way. Nothing is correct. We're always
Yeah,
iterating. So like the you can say
refined
the
or
standard way of like doing things, and then
yeah,
you can build on
yeah,
top of that and
yeah,
have your own little tweaks and stuff. But this is kind of like the basics of what you guys should be doing. And we're going to be covering, we have 7 steps in this, and it's going to go from all the way from the initial touch point of a client. So when they sends you an email, what should you do, to all the way at the end where you have to launch their site or finish designing their site, whatever it may be, and what you should
yeah.
do in between all of those. And we're going to break it down into 7 steps. So yeah, do you have anything else to add on, Vamal?
I think nothing in particular. I think we sort of got into a bit of a disclaimer right in the beginning.
Yeah.
It's not the only way to do things, not the best way to do things, but it's sort of standard. I think a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people in the industry sort of follow the same pattern, and of course, we have different tweaks which we will get into. Other than that, yeah, if you always can improve your process, I think it's always better for your business. And I think you want to talk about, what's the value of having a process, right?
Yeah, so actually before we get into that, I just want to say, guys, last episode we set a like goal, if you don't remember, for
I
10 likes.
swear to God, I thought no one is gonna do it.
And we smashed it. We got 15 likes. So I just want to say thank you guys. And
And the thing is, right, you sort of mentioned
yeah,
it at the very end, so I was like, oh, I should have mentioned it in
yeah,
the early 5 minutes because otherwise people will drop off. But it's not
yeah.
bad actually.
But yeah, thank you guys. I know our last episode done really well, so we're gonna be posting a lot more content similar to that. Like
Yeah,
we know that you guys like talking about money, so we're gonna be uploading more episodes about money and our whole Webflow process and how you guys can make more money.
yeah.
So yeah, do you want to set a like goal right now, Vimolin? I think you should do the honors this time.
20, 20.
20.
Yeah,
Oh, okay, okay.
let's see.
100% increase. All right, cool. Guys, let's try to hit 20 likes. Okay. All right.
Hopefully.
Thank you guys. All right. Let's get started with the episode. All right,
Cool.
cool. So, what is the importance of, having a process? Well, firstly, I think I did mention this in previous episodes, but the number one thing I can think of on top of my head is it's so important to have a process. Not only, um, well, I think the main thing is so you don't. If you take on a client, firstly, you can have a consistent process they use for each, and because you have a consistent process, each client that you do get, you know what went wrong and how you can improve. If you have a different process for each, you have no factor that you can put your finger on and say, okay, that is
Yeah,
why the whole process went bad, right?
yeah.
And I think another thing for it is like a reminder for yourself. Like when you do get a client, all you need to do is go in a Notion where you have all of your step-by-step process laid down, and you're just like bish bash bosh, you get the client and you churn them out very
It's
fast,
just it
and
just
it's
saves
just
a lot of
efficient, right?
time. It
Yeah,
saves a lot of time. If you're going to be doing this for years, every single day, just not thinking about it, freeing up your mind just to think about other things rather than like, oh, what am I going to send them next? What is the next step? If you already sort of have it written down somewhere, just copy paste
yeah.
it. You're good to go.
Yeah, and I think for me it's like I remember before I never used to like take note
Same.
of my processes or whatever,
Nah.
and every time I used to like get another climb, like, oh, what do I do? And I used to remind myself, and it was like it was kind of
Yeah.
It was just so
Even
inefficient, and
even
it just
something as
yeah,
simple as like a template on Notion saves
yeah,
so much time
exactly.
because like a
Mm,
proposal used to be something that I dread because like every single
yeah,
time I need to do it. Whereas if there's a template, fill
mm,
it up, put it out there, you're good to go, right?
exactly. And even if you have it something as simple as step one, step two, step three, like
Three,
just
yeah,
one sentence for each step, like that is
saves
progress, and you
so
can just add
much
on top
time.
of that. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I think
And another thing is like when you eventually, obviously everyone starts off solo and then you hire people. Once you start hiring people, because you have a set process, is easier for you to onboard your team members and get them
yeah,
involved in the process. If you don't
yeah,
have a process, how are you meant to explain to team members, okay, this is what you have to do, right? So it's better just to make a process to obviously save time currently, but also in the future when you hire people.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
awesome.
think we
So
can, I think
yeah,
we
so
can get into step
then
one.
you wanna get into step one, which is lead qualification.
Yeah, so in general, lead qualification usually starts as soon as you get your first email or they book the call or however you communicate with your lead. It's the first step in the process for, I think, everybody in the industry, is to make sure the lead that you're getting actually has the budget, has the timeline, or they're a nice person or a nice company to work with. You're not going to work with every single lead that you get. And I know it's tempting to say yes to a lot of, as soon as they reach out to you, you're like, yes, I'll work, without asking the budget, timeline, and even something as simple as like, are they a nice person, are they interesting to work with? So the first step is always about lead qualification. The way I think both of us do it is through Calendly. We used to do contact form. So you fill out a contact form, and then we get an email, and then we send another email. But I think that adds a bit of a in between layer. So once they send you a contact form request, you gotta follow up that with, hey, nice to meet you, blah blah blah. Do you want to book in a call, right? And then, so most of the time, always there's a drop off in response. They probably got booked a call with someone else, or there's someone who's easier to communicate with. So I think both of us sort of just cut that contact form and just straight went to a Calendly link. The pros, the pro of that is, the main thing is there's no lead off, right? Like, they book a call, unless they cancel it, they will show up. Even if you don't end up working with them, you talk to them about the project and sort of help them a bit. The negative is anybody can book a call. So there were times where we both had random people sort of just booking calls, just to ask us about, hey, do you have any jobs for me, or hey, can you
Yeah.
work on this one site for a thousand
Still
bucks?
happens, man. Still happens.
Yeah, so it's very hard to sort of control that. But again,
Mm.
it's a calendar. They can't book you for today. They can always book for tomorrow, and you can always cancel it. So the con is
Yeah.
not massive, but it's just sometimes it could get a bit annoying.
Yeah.
There.
And I think a lot of people when they hop on a call, so that is like lead qualification, the first touch point, whether that's Calendly, whatever. Your main goal in this first step is getting them on a
So
call.
yeah,
So let's say you get them on a call now. I think a lot of freelancers, and this was me in the beginning, I thought that the goal of the call, right, was for me to
sell.
sell myself as
Yeah,
much as possible.
yeah,
But to be honest, is that's like half of it. The other half is making sure if the client is right for you as well. So
yeah.
you have to make sure that you're both, good fit for each other. And I think that in a sense subconsciously increases your self-worth as well and makes you more confident in a way. So
It's
don't just,
because you're
sell
you're not
yourself
pressured.
and
Yeah, because you're not pressured to close the
yeah.
call, or like get the money, or anything like that. I did that initially as well. Like, every single call is like a sales call, and if I don't close the
Mm,
client, I feel, ah, damn, I failed. But now it's more of just like, I just want to see whether they're nice to work with, whether I
mm,
land them or not. It's the next step is not step one, it's step two or step three, right? And I
mm-hmm.
think that relieves a lot of pressure, makes you a
Yeah.
lot nicer to talk to. Than, nobody likes to be sold. Everybody
Yeah,
just wants to have a
definitely.
conversation.
And I think I
And
like the one point that you said, Vim, which was like getting a feel if they're a nice person. And I think that is like one thing that I learned, which I never thought would be true, but
same.
it's true. Like
Yeah.
you get kind of like an energy or like a vibe you can say from
Yeah,
a
because
client
your
call. And
project,
yeah.
every project, there will be something that goes wrong, right? Whether you
Mm,
scoped it, or something is missing, or bugs or whatever, something will go wrong. And if they're not a nice person, that something going wrong becomes a nightmare to deal with. But if they're a nice person, they understand, or they're helpful, or they find ways to help you out with that. That
mm-hmm.
relieves a lot of the pressure, especially before launch, when there's a lot of things to do, and there's a lot of, you're ready for launch, and there's so many things that you got to do. If they can sort of help out, really relieve some of the stress. That's why you always gauge whether they're a nice person. Not in the best of scenarios. The best of scenarios, anybody could work with a douchebag, right? But when things get hard, you probably want someone nicer to work with than,
Mm-hmm.
a douchebag.
Yeah, and I think over time you'll learn like the telltale signs of a
Yeah,
good client. Like,
yeah,
and I think just making sure, I think one thing that I've learned is if a client tells you, and obviously this is not like a case, this is not true in all cases, but like, as a general rule of thumb, right? If a client, what I've seen is whenever a client tells me, oh, do you have everything you need? Do you need anything more? If they like give you everything and like they have like whatever you request, they give it to you in a timely manner. I think that's a good sign of a good
yeah.
client. But whenever like I
I
think I
can I
had
can
this
tell you a
client the other
telltale
day.
sign for a bad client. When they
Yeah, I
start
was actually gonna
saying,
get into that, but
"Oh
yeah.
shit," when they start saying things is easy. Oh, you can do
Yeah,
that, right? That should not be
yeah,
too difficult on Webflow.
that's some,
Oh,
yeah,
that should be easy on Webflow. You can do it. So that
yeah,
that that sort of, when the moment you hear that, run. Because
Yeah,
right
and
now I'm
yeah,
sort of
and I
in that.
think another
Yeah,
one is another one for a bad client I've seen recently is when like I ask them for content or whatever, and they kind of not hesitant, but they don't give it in a timely manner, or like they don't
yeah,
give it
yeah, yeah, yeah.
properly. I think I had one guy just send me a literal like PowerPoint slide and be like, that's your content. I'm like, what? Like, but it's cool.
Yeah,
So yeah, you learn over time like what kind of signs client gives off that will make them bad and good, and you can use that to decipher whether or not they're qualified to move on to step two. And
yeah,
saying that step two is closing the deal. So closing the deal, there's a bunch of stuff involved, but I think the main three parameters are obviously making sure that you send them a proposal, that whether that be an email form or if you use a software, or if you have like a whole presentation slide, depending on the client. Some clients, especially the big ones, like royalty treatment, right?
yeah,
And I think also proposal. Second one is contract or scope of work, and then or statement of work. And the next one is, what was it? Invoice. So proposal, contract, and invoice. Making sure, and it moves as a step by step. If one is not complete, do not move on to the next one. So you have to make sure they accept the proposal,
yeah,
make sure that the contract is signed, and make sure that invoice is paid. Only when they do these three things is when you move them on to step three. And I think
yeah,
this step is pretty self-explanatory. You can do it via email or whatever.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Cool. So step three is, after they've done all of this stuff, they signed, they accepted the proposal, they like, the scope of work, you got a timeline ready, they signed the contract, they're happy with everything, and they paid off the invoice. Then you can move on to onboarding. And with me, I got like a process where, firstly, actually, let me just pull it up. But I actually send them a welcome email. I invite them to a Slack Connect channel, or like I just send them a Slack invite or whatever. And
yeah,
then what I like to do, if it depends obviously on the project, whether it's a design and development or just development. But if it's a design and development, I create a Google Drive folder and I send that to them and I tell them, okay, upload your design, brand guidelines, whatever you think will help us with the build. Just upload it there. And yeah, that's what I do. That's what I like to do personally for onboarding.
yeah. I think it's very similar. So once they pay the invoice, they get a Slack channel, a Connect channel with me or whoever's working on the project, so that we keep communications. Try to avoid emails because I don't try to check them as often, and it's a
Mm.
bit annoying to send emails
It's
rather
so
than
long,
Slack
man.
messages. Yeah, so
Right.
Slack is like the tool that I never knew I needed until I need it. So they get a channel, and there's also an internal channel that we create. Just if it's just me working on it, it's just me in it. If there's
Mm-hmm.
someone else, both of us are in it, or three of us are in it. There is just internal chat. It's like, hey, have you done this? These are all the files, the folders, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Some most of the time, the client already sort of have their own Google or we transfer or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. They send their content or assets however they prefer. There's We don't tell them do it here, do it there. Just I think people have different processes. We just
Yeah.
follow what they like. Yeah, and then onboarding is as simple as like kickoff call. After usually a kickoff call is not needed because for us, I think the scope proposal sort of tells us what we need to do. But
Yeah.
sometimes a kickoff call is needed just to recap things, just to make sure we,
Mm-hmm.
especially if it's like very task oriented, like do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. We make sure on the kickoff call these are the only things we're gonna do and nothing else. Whereas if it's a
Mm-hmm.
design development process, there's nothing much besides like a call to maybe ask them about what's their inspiration, what their competitors do, all of this thing. But most of the time, we try to avoid calls just to keep
Yeah.
things easier.
Yeah. I think kickoff call, just do it if it's
If it's
necessary.
yeah, if it's
It's like an
easier
optional
to
step, right? Yeah.
yeah yeah
And I think it doesn't even have to be kickoff call. It could be. I've heard
a,
some
a
people send
loom
like a questionnaire or something like that,
yeah
right? Where
yeah.
like they send them a type form and they tell them fill this out. But I think that's a bit. Um,
Nah, I don't
I
think
mean, I
clients
haven't done
like
it, so I
it.
don't know if it works for me. But
For
you
me,
never know. But
I always try to
mm,
put myself in their shoes. If I'm working with somebody and they send me a questionnaire, I'm not gonna fill that up because like why just like you know what I mean, right? It's easier if you can just chat on a call. If you're
mm,
making me do all the work, then so for me, I just feel like it's not a really good client experience. So
yeah, I
questionnaires
heard that. Yeah.
are easy for you as a business, but it's not the best experience because they know
Yeah.
you send this to everyone. There's no personality to it. So a call is
Yeah.
always preferred to like asking your client to fill up a form.
100%. I've never sent a questionnaire before, so I don't really
Yeah,
know if it's gonna work for me or not. But I have heard a lot of people say,
yeah,
for it, it's like I think like a kickoff questionnaire where they
yeah,
send them a questionnaire and
yeah,
it has
yeah. I've
like
seen
this
it as well.
the steps that we they ask the questions that we already answered in the previous steps, like
Yeah,
do you have a brand guidelines, what kind of fonts do you want, colors, whatever. And I think you can go over that on a call or an email. It really
yeah.
depends, but I think for you getting a gauge of what the client will prefer, I think
A
that's a good
call
thing.
is
If
yeah,
yeah, like if you can tell that, oh, I can tell this client won't really enjoy being on a call. I think it'll be better if I just send them an email. Just do that, right? So it is,
right.
yeah.
Yeah,
Just use your best judgment when it comes to that.
yeah.
Yeah. So cool. So next is after you've onboarded them, you're ready to get the project started. Now, this is where like, your service comes into play of you actually designing and building the website. So step 4 is obviously design. And I think I like to use Figma. I know Vim, you like to use XD.
Oh, did you know XD
So
is free now? I
is it?
we found that today. Like, there's a starter plan which is completely free. Anybody,
Oh,
you don't
I
even
think
need to log in. You just download it and
oh,
start using it. I was like,
I'm
oh
pretty sure Figma
damn.
already has that.
Yeah, so they pretty much come with Figma, but
Yeah.
no Figma, man. XD is always better.
Yeah, nah, man. Figma. Okay, you know what? Everyone who likes Figma, comment Figma. Everyone who
Oh
likes XD,
no,
comment XD.
nobody uses XD, but
Exactly, bro.
it's good, man. Trust me, it's good.
I mean, I've had a few projects on XD, but yeah, we digress.
Yeah,
So yeah, in terms of design, whether you use Figma, XD, I heard some people use Photoshop and
sketch,
Illustrator.
sketch.
Sketch is
Yeah,
one as
yeah.
well, which is I think that's quite expensive.
That's the
But
OG one. Yeah,
that's the OG. Yeah, I've heard like Rand Cigar talk about that a lot. But
yeah.
yeah, whatever design
Design tool.
system you prefer, you can design on that. I heard a lot of people what they do is they start off with lo-fi and then
Well,
hi-fi,
what is your
or they start
process?
with a wireframe, lo-fi, and then
Yeah.
hi-fi. It depends really on what the client wants. If like the timeline is short, then change it up and just jump straight into the hi-fi.
Mm-hmm.
What I like to do personally is design like a couple of sections. I don't, and then show the client and then get feedback on that, and then they
I
can tell me,
see.
oh, I don't like this, I don't like that, and then I can use that feedback to develop or design the rest of the project.
I see.
Um, and before I get into design, what I like to do is I have an extra step where if it is a design project, what I like to do is send them a visual sitemap on a platform called octopus.do. And that platform basically it allows you to build a visual sitemap that shows each page and and not only each page but each section in each page. And I think that's important. But Vim, I know you don't do that, but for me, it's worked personally. I think what happened was I think I just stumbled on a YouTube video, and I'm like, you know what, this is a good idea because I had a problem before where it's like, how do I show the client what sections I'm going to include on a homepage or whatever? I have to design
Mm,
all of them one by one, right, before I get to confirm the sections. So
yeah.
I'm like, you know what? Let me just use this octopus.do whatever tool, and it actually did
Right.
work for me. So before I get into design, I like to confirm the sections on the homepage, and then I move on to design and develop it. So there's no back and forth between
I
which
see.
section goes where and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure your process is the exact same, but without the sitemap, right?
Siri got triggered. I'm sorry.
Oh,
I
Siri.
was
Oh
like,
no.
my phone went off, and now I'm like, who's calling me? And then Siri is like, I didn't get that. But
Oh man.
my design process is, I think I try to simplify things mainly for me because I
Hmm.
don't want to go a lot back and forth with the client.
Yeah.
I most of the time start with something called a mid-fi design, where
Hmm.
it's not a wireframe. It's also not a high fidelity design. So for those who don't know, wireframes are just boxes with axes and just boxes for content. Just as you can imagine, it's just a wireframe of the site, right? It's very similar to the visual sitemap thing that you do. It's just a sort
Hmm.
of telling clients like, this is the section, this section, this is this section,
Hmm.
right? I avoid that because I pretty much don't know what sections I'm going to be doing. So I don't want to like force myself like
Hmm.
focus on that. It takes time to even create a wireframe takes some time. So what I usually
Yeah.
tend to do is if I already have the content, my whole job is to put that content in a way where it sort of makes sense. Right. Yeah. So that is a visual
Yeah. So
wireframe.
this is an
This I
example of
would call this a
octopus.do.
wireframe. I would call this a
Yeah.
wireframe because this is what you normally do anyways. right?
Yeah.
But the thing is, even doing this is sort of an extra step that I think
Mm-hmm.
I personally don't want to do. So what I normally do is, if I already have the content, I just try to make sure I structure the site to have the content sort of flow. And
Mm-hmm.
on the site while I'm designing, I just write why the section is here. So if there's a
Mm-hmm.
hero section, if there's a logo underneath, I sort of explain it. Oh, it's just to build some trust, and then show your projects, and then a call to action, and then more. So when I'm presenting it to them, there's already things that they can see that I've already taught, and I've already made the call for them. Because what I don't
Yeah.
want to end up doing is making them decide on every single thing, which gives them that false thing of like, oh, I'm in control of the entire project, which they
Mm-hmm.
are, but they also pay you because you're an expert to do it. I try to take the
Mm.
control to my end, and I tell them, this is the way we are going to do it. If you don't want to do it in this way, you'd let me know. Right. So most of the time, I think 99% of the clients, they just, oh, that looks good, because it sort of makes sense when they see it.
Mm.
And I also try to add colors as quickly as possible, add images as quickly as possible. If possible, I even show them the final design, or like a high fidelity design as the final thing. Again, this is not traditional. No designer would ever do this, and they'll lose their job if they do this. But if it's just us, I think it most of the clients, they don't really know what the hell's a wireframe. You gotta explain to them what's a wireframe, what's a low fidelity design. It just too much communication sort of drowns out the project. But when they see the actual design, most of the time they're blown away, because they don't have to decide, they don't have to pick which version they
Mm.
want. You give them 5 different versions of a section, they get overwhelmed, and they're not experts, so they don't really know what's the best, right? So again, this,
Mm-hmm.
this is not conventional, this is not traditional, but I think it works, especially for if you're a designer and a developer. If you can take a lot of the control in your hand and give them a choice of like whether you like it or you don't. If you don't, we do it again. So that
Mm.
sort of keeps things simpler for both ends, is what I feel.
Yeah. That actually makes a lot of sense when you explain it like that. I think
Because when people
yeah.
clients, they always say like, oh, clients come with unlimited revisions. That's
Mm.
because you
It's
give
because you
them the
give them
space.
too much, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
give them
yeah.
the space to sort of be in control, right? So they feel
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm in control, I need to give them all this feedback. So they start
Mm.
commanding you, so you become the hand for their mind,
Mm.
right? So they start changing the font size, just
Maybe
making this
maybe that
big.
could be like another topic of how
Yeah,
to
maybe. Yeah,
avoid
it's
scope creep,
interesting.
perhaps. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
that's actually
yeah.
makes a lot of sense. Like, if you don't give the clients the tools, like,
Yeah,
or if
because
you
they
don't
don't
handle,
know,
yeah, if
right?
you don't hand over the tools for them to, be
Yeah,
in
and
control,
and
then
and
they
the thing
won't be
is,
in control,
we
right?
sort of
So,
get guilty of that. So if you ever outsourced anything, so for me, for example, if you outsource animation, we can't do animation. But if a freelancer
mm,
is still coming back every single time, like, do you like this? Do you like this? Do you like this? Do you like that? You sort
mm,
of naturally take lead on the project and be like, oh,
mm,
can you change this? Can you make this smaller? Can you make this bigger? Even though I have
mm,
no technical knowledge on how to do it, because
mm.
that person sort of keeps asking me for my opinion, have this natural. We all do have this natural
Obligation,
tendency.
right? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, somebody needs to take lead on the project,
Mm,
and if the person working on it seems to not take the lead, it's very natural for us as the client, because we are paying for it. We take the lead for them, right? So try
mm.
to avoid that by sort of giving clients maybe one or two options. Try to cut as many communication as possible. Again, not advice. I'm not telling you to do it, but try it out to see what works.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone who's watching out there has a problem where, you know, what is it? I think is it not scope creep? Is it?
It's
It's
just
when
unlimited revisions. It's way too much
no,
revisions, too much
there's
back and
one name
forth.
when like a client like um tried to control the project. I forgot what it's called now.
Be hands, I think. I think it's like
Nah.
you end up becoming the hands for them.
Oh, micromanaging. That's what it's called.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
when a
yeah,
client
yeah,
when
yeah.
a client tries to sorry,
Micromanage,
when
yeah.
when a client if anyone who's watching is suffering or experiencing like micromanaging
Yeah.
from a
It's
client,
it usually
then
happens
I think
because
this is like a good point where like
yeah.
if you don't give the client the tools they need to control you, then they
If you
won't.
don't give them
So
if you don't let them manage
yeah,
it, they're not gonna manage it. Because they have
exactly.
other things to do.
But then again, I think you have to be careful in you have to give them just enough freedom to the point where
Yeah.
they are happy
You
that they're
they still
satisfied
gotta feel,
with
yeah,
their freedom and
it's
they
a
feel like
thing
they're in
that,
control. Yeah.
again, you gotta test it out, play with it, but you cannot be like, this is the only way you're gonna get it. If you don't like it, you can
Mm.
fuck off. But you
Yeah.
can't do that with the client, right? So you gotta let them choose. Like, oh, do you like this color or do you like this color? I prefer
Mm,
this color, yada yada yada. Most of the time, even if they push back on it, I had this one yesterday. They're like, don't you think the blue sort of makes it look a bit too bright? I'm like, okay, fair
mm,
enough. Okay, then they're like, should we revert it back to the gray? Now I'm like, no, the gray is very Apple-like and it's still a bit too obvious. And then we then found a different way to do it, right? So
mm.
even if there's a pushback, you sort of justify why you did it in a certain way and sort of try to incorporate their their feedback as well. So even one or two, they'll pretty much be satisfied with it, just to have their
Mm.
input on the side, you know.
Yeah, and I think, you know, yeah, I think the one thing that I would advise freelancers or anyone who's watching is you have to make sure that you give them just enough freedom to the point where they feel like they're in control,
Yeah,
but not too little to the
too
point
much.
where they feel like they're
Yeah,
not. But
that
then
that
it's
you are
quite
not
hard
in
to you have to
control. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
you have to find a balance, and I think the balance is going to be weighed
Practice,
differently with each
practice.
client, I think, as
Yeah,
well. Like
yeah.
some
That's why you
clients
sort of do
maybe,
your scope.
yeah,
You do your qualification. You sort of
yeah,
keep this in mind as well.
and yeah,
You know,
I think that's why like clients that pay more are generally better. Sorry,
hands down, hands
clients that
down.
pay more are generally better. The
Yeah,
reason being
because
because yeah,
they literally, you're the
they don't
expert. Yeah.
exactly right,
Yeah,
and
because if you're charging, let's say,
yeah,
$10,000 for a site, that's a huge amount of money, right? For any company,
yeah.
it's a huge amount of money.
But
They
I
know
think
you're,
if that's
yeah,
the only $10,000 you have, you're obviously gonna want to be in control. But
yeah,
if
yeah,
like if that 10,000 is like,
yeah,
1% of what your annual income,
yeah,
then
yeah,
obviously
yeah.
you're obviously gonna care, but you're not gonna care
You
that
you
much. You're
sort
just
of
gonna let
trust
the
them.
expert handle
Yeah,
it, right?
yeah, yeah.
Exactly. So
Cool.
yeah,
Now
well, we actually went
development.
on that for
Let's
quite a long time. So just to summarize, like, design, you can have your own process, is very
yeah.
different to each freelancer. But as a general rule of thumb, you should
These
do
are
like a
our,
wireframe
yeah,
of some sort or like a sitemap of some sort, and then just jump into design. It's
yeah.
optional if you want to do lo-fi, hi-fi, one page, couple of
Whatever that
sections. It all
works for you,
depends.
right? Yeah.
But just design it and don't. I think this is a new point that I didn't think of. Just don't put give the client as much control as
Too much
don't
control.
give the client the tools they need to control you,
Yeah,
to avoid micromanaging all of that stuff.
yeah.
And so cool, after you've done the design, what do you do next? And this is where step 5 comes in, which is obviously you get the design and you develop it in
I think
Webflow.
this is by
um
far the easiest phase,
it's easiest, man.
because a lot of
As
the
I mean,
a lot,
it's only easy as long as you done step 4 right, I think.
yeah, yeah. So once you
As
go
long
to
as
like
you've done
step
step 4 right
five,
and you're good at
it's like,
Webflow, then it's easy.
yeah, like step five is like, there's nothing the client needs to approve on. There
Mm,
maybe one or few pieces here and there, they want to add a few sections here and there, but it,
mm,
that isn't as feedback oriented as step 4, which is the design process. And I think this is why a lot of
mm,
agencies sort of jump into Webflow development, because I think that's it's also easier to sort of productize Webflow development compared to design, right? You can set up 5 pages, 2 CMS. It's very analytical. You can sort of track your time very easily as well, whereas design is a lot more like opinion and it's very
mm,
subjective, and it
yeah.
really depends on
That's why
your
so many agencies are going into dev only.
every agency
Because
is
yeah,
going to more development oriented. But
because
I
to be
think
honest, I find it easier. I think eventually
I
I'm
think
going
it
to do
is. It
that.
is easier. It is definitely easier.
Design is just so. I mean, I think I've said this from day one, bro. Like design is just.
I was thinking
I
about
mean,
this
I
the other
like
day
it.
as well.
Yeah,
I
but
like it, but I think profitability wise, Webflow development is always going to be more
100%.
profitable.
And
And I was like,
I think
oh,
less
should we?
headache wise, Webflow is
I was
easier as well.
genuinely thinking about this yesterday. Like, should we stop designing? Because even though I like it, it always ends up being the longest phase.
Yeah,
It's
man.
like
I
just
love
way too
design,
much.
but
Yeah,
it's
so I was like,
yeah.
maybe we should focus more on just development work, and maybe do design if the budget is right.
The
I don't know.
design
We're
is
going,
fun when you do it for yourself, but when you do it for a client,
yeah,
is
yeah. But this is going beyond. This is like alt talk session.
yeah. This is
But yeah,
awesome.
development wise, in terms of phase, in terms of steps, I think it's very
Oh,
standard.
I know this.
Yeah,
I think it obviously depends on each person, but I think if you're good Webflow dev, if you're a pro or an expert, I think you don't really need to listen to that part. Just do your own thing, do your
yeah,
own process. But as a general rule of thumb, if you're a beginner, the number one thing you must do is obviously set up everything in your project settings.
yeah,
Some people like to have like the client name and then staging. or what I like to do is have the client name and then project. I don't know why. I think that's just a
Yeah.
habit or whatever.
Yeah.
No
So
real
it's just
reason.
about like setting
But
up the
yeah,
project,
setting
adding
up the
the
project. Yeah,
font, the images, structuring it properly,
style
giving it
guide,
proper
which is
class name.
important as well.
Yeah, it's just very
Making sure you have a
standard
style
workflow
guide.
development stuff, which I think a lot
Yeah.
of other people. I think there's nothing unique you can do in terms of the process
Mm,
here. I think everybody pretty much does the same.
mm,
As long as it's high quality, just go for it. I think there's nothing much we can sort of add as much as the design phase, again, because it's more subjective. This
yeah.
is more like to the point. Just make sure it works, make sure it's clean, make sure you use proper styling guides,
Mm,
naming structure and all of that. And I
yeah.
think step
And
6
yeah.
is, yeah.
Actually, before we get into step six, something just came out in my mind about Webflow development. I think what I like to do is, how should you, what are the steps you should take to develop? So should you develop, should you build out all the pages and then do CMS and then do interactions or whatever? Like what is the order of how you should develop? What I like to do is I just like to develop all the pages statically without any interactions, no
Yeah,
CMS,
yeah, yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
And then afterwards, then I like to do the CMS, and then the very
yeah,
last thing I do is interactions. And I
yeah.
think that
And
just makes
code, and
things a
code.
lot more, yeah, and code. And I think
Yeah,
that just makes things so much easier, like just getting the entire build done and then just
yeah,
adding on top of that, adding on top of that with like CMS and interactions and stuff. So I think that's like what I found obviously to be the most efficient way to develop in
yeah,
Webflow. But I think apart from that is pretty straightforward, to be honest.
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
think I think that's pretty much covers workflow development.
It's the easiest step. Cool. Now,
Yeah,
step six. Step six is quality assurance. So this obviously has to be done by yourself. And in this step, I'm guessing there's going to be a lot of like client communication. But I think the most important thing that we should talk about in this step is how you should go about quality assurance. And I think this goes back to the point that Vim you mentioned. I think in step 4, where you don't want to tell them in every step, oh, is this fine, to the point where they start micromanaging you and
yeah.
do not take you for the expert. You kind of wanted to give them enough quality assurance or feedback or revisions
Yeah,
to the point where they feel like
yes.
they're
It
in
just,
control.
yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
And I think something like markup.io and stuff like that gives a bit too much control. It's fine if they're paying for it, like extra, a chunk amount of the budget is just for quality assurance. Fair enough, that makes sense. But most freelancers or very beginners, you're not even charging for this, right? It's just, it usually comes under Webflow development. Quality assurance isn't sort of its own line item in most people's
Mm,
invoices, but it should be, because it is beyond. Most of the time, you pretty much, if you have a design, you build it. That's pretty much it. A lot of this quality assurance thing comes because of responsiveness. A lot of designers don't provide mobile,
mm,
desktop, tablet, and large screens. They always provide 1440p designs,
mm.
which doesn't scale
True.
down. Your client could have a MacBook Air 11-inch and be like, why is it not looking the same? So a lot of this quality assurance is like getting your
Yeah.
client being like, this is responsiveness, this is how it works. You can't have your exact mobile design to exactly as your
Hmm.
mock-up, because you have designed it for, I don't know, 400 pixels wide, but mobile goes all the way down to 320 pixels. A lot of it just ed- educating your client on responsiveness and why certain things look the way they do. Sometimes some functionality is not possible, so if you're going to have nested CMS items, you could do one. But if they have like 3 or 4, it gets quite messy, even with something like client first, even with like FinSuite and all that. It's so messy for you to like sort of keep track, and
Hmm.
you lose track of like where things go. So all of this sort of comes under quality assurance and educating the client, which, again, in terms of process, you should not give them way too much control over it, right? If they start
Hmm.
telling you like, make this tax 3% bigger, you're in for a nightmare.
Yeah.
You're
Trust me,
very
man.
clear to them, like, you have done it in a
Or
certain way.
the classic can you make this stand out, or can you make this pop, or like
Yeah,
stuff like that,
yeah,
man.
you can't be like, yeah. Sometimes I always get like, oh, can this text is wrapping, one word is wrapping underneath. I'm like, bro,
Yeah.
you can fix it, but like, I don't think anybody is gonna give a shit if your text
Yeah.
is 2 lines or 3 lines. Stuff like very petty
Yeah.
stuff that they see because they want it to look quote unquote perfect, but they
Mm.
completely forget there's like an infinite amount of screen sizes that they're looking at. Yeah, it's just a lot of this stress comes in
Yeah,
quality
so
assurance.
I think quality assurance, there's two sides to it. So obviously one is making sure that you do your internal quality assurance,
Yeah,
and then obviously getting feedback from the client themselves. And just because we're on the topic of quality assurance, I want to drop a plug to my blog, which I created. We actually, when was the date? I think we uploaded this blog in March, and it goes over the 8 steps or 8 things you need to check before launching your website. And I think this can go on the quality assurance. I'm just going to quickly go over, the 8 steps. So obviously, number one is making
yeah,
sure that everything is responsive. Um, Number two is making sure that your style guide is all done. Your fonts, your margins, your rich text as well, which is important. Make sure that they're all styled properly. And then obviously is your UI and UX. So making sure that your hover states, interaction speed, any the logo sizes and stuff like that. Step four is your SEO. So making sure your headings, your alt tags, your 301 redirects, SEO titles, all of that is set up. Number five is your form submissions. So making sure, actually, bro, I should share my screen. But yeah, step number five is forms, so making sure inputs is correct. Step
yeah,
six is CMS pages, so making sure your slugs and your fields are all correct. And then project settings. So obviously this step I think gets overlooked, which is like the favicon, the web clip, the language code, the removing Webflow branding if that's what we want to do. And obviously number
yeah,
eight is making sure. I think this is like one thing that I learned not too long ago, is that some sites may look different in like Internet Explorer or Safari and Google
yeah,
Chrome. And I
yeah,
think one thing that I found is gradients look like completely different in Google Chrome and Safari. So I think that's one thing that you should be aware of, and make sure that there's no um, uh, mistakes in other browsers, and make sure that they're all the site looks consistent in all browsers.
yeah.
And yeah, I think those are the 8 steps that you should take in terms of quality assurance. And after you've done that, obviously it's step 7, where you launch the site. And there's just a few steps involved. I'm pretty sure, Vim, you
Yeah,
can walk
so
us
for
through this.
launch is usually setting up your domain, your hosting. If they are, on a different platform and you're migrating them to a new platform like Webflow, got to make sure
Hmm.
SEO, you got to make sure your meta tags. I think this also comes under QA sort of overlap,
Hmm.
but you just got to make sure, everything works, make sure mobile works, all the links work, the navigation works, your footer links
Links.
work.
Yeah.
Yeah, set up 301 redirects in case your URLs change. What else do you do? 404 page, I think is
Yeah.
very,
404
I
page.
forget it
Design.
most of
Make
the
sure you
time as
design
well.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just stuff like this you always pick up before launch. And then
Mm.
once you're done with launch, what I normally do is sort of give them a Loom video on how to update their blog and their
Yeah.
case studies, or any content on the page
Yeah.
and images. If there's anything a bit technical that they need to sort of go into the back end, if you want to change, I record a separate video, which
Yeah.
I, very clearly say this: you do not touch anything else except these steps to change maybe
Hmm.
this carousel or maybe hide this section because there's no content yet. If you want to unhide it
Hmm.
once you've populated your blog, this is how you do it. More technical Loom videos go there. Because right now there's a lot of code that we also use for some of the sites. If I can copy and paste them on the site, I do that before launch. Or if there's a lot of code, I usually host it somewhere else and sort of link it onto the site and make sure everything works, gives that a test as well.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think the Loom videos is actually a really important part, because I think, or a lot of my projects that I get, most of the training videos are something to do with the blog or uploading
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
CMS, because I
yeah,
use like rich text enhancer. I think by refocus or things a lot, like
yeah,
sweet
yeah,
text and
yeah,
stuff,
yeah,
and making sure that you tell the client how to upload blogs properly.
yeah,
Making sure that they know not to include any H1s in
mm,
the blog body and stuff like that. I think
yeah,
making training videos is important in that sense.
yeah,
And you can provide that before launch. Obviously, connecting the domain and all of that stuff, it's pretty straightforward. So yeah, and I think after you've done that, I think we don't have a step 8 written here, but I think a step 8 can be waiting after a couple of months after you launch the site. I think making sure reaching back out to the client and ask them to see the results, and
I see.
how the site
Yeah,
has been working for them. and getting a
Yeah, yeah,
testimonial
yeah,
back and stuff. You know,
yeah,
you can get a testimonial straight after the project. Or you can reach out to them after a couple of months of the site launch and ask them
mm,
for a case study. You know, perhaps you can hop on a call and jump into, you know, the real details of how the website helped them, and you can make a whole story behind that, and you can sell that story to get future clients. And I think
yeah,
that's what FinSuite said in the recent FN Growth episode, is about the whole flywheel, where you generate attention and then you tell a story, a success story. That story is relatable to other clients, and then you close those clients, and then you create new stories, and those stories grab attention, and then just a whole cycle, and it goes round and round and round. And I think that's really
mm,
important in step 8, making sure that you, after you launch the site, you try to come up with a story that you can sell
yeah,
later on to land more clients. For example, one, I think I did upload a LinkedIn post about this, is I set up, like, you know, I made like a little story where I said, I, you know, obviously built a Webflow site for a client. I set up this CMS and the SEO settings. I done some SEO for them, and now they're getting more bookings and all of that stuff. That, you know, client may be able to see that and then be like, oh, you know, that is, you know, I can see myself being, you know, the person in that story, and then they can
yeah,
reach out to you and you can get more clients. So I think making sure that not only you get paid, I think the value that you get from doing a project should not only be money, it should also be the ability
marketing.
to land more clients in the future, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
marketing. Yeah, you should extract as much, you know, you
squeeze
should
it.
squeeze
Yeah,
that, you should squeeze that project, you know, milk that project with every last drop, you know, whether that be, you know, generating marketing assets, landing more clients, all of that good stuff. So I
yeah,
think that is a very important step that's outside of, you know, that kind of the whole client process.
yeah.
Would you
I
agree with him?
think yeah, yeah, yeah. Just took it just went on. But yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
it's
man.
all valuable. Bye.
Cool.
All right, bye.
So this is, yeah, so this is
Yeah,
yeah, I think
Koki.
before normally what we do is you have like outro, but you know,
You're like,
I've
I
told
want
you
to be
be
more chill. Bye. I
or
thought you had
edgy or
something
something like.
funny.
I showed this to you, man, but yeah. All
Did
right,
you? I
guys.
was like, you're like, I'm
Yeah,
gonna be
I did,
edgy.
but
I thought you're gonna say something and then you're like, this is bye.
yeah. So I try to, you know, because normally it says outro, and I feel like that
Yeah,
might
yeah,
get the
fair
wrong
enough.
message, but fair enough.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Yeah.
20 likes, yeah.
Those. Sorry.
20 likes on this video.
Yeah, 20 likes. Yeah, make sure that we smash 20 likes. You know, I think we did cover a lot in this video, like especially when I was a beginner, I wish I had something like this that people could, you know,
Yeah.
tell me, because when I started playing, I'm like, what the hell should I do? And
And the thing is, the
I
people that
think,
we normally
yeah,
watch are like really world level experts,
exactly.
and you can't
Yeah.
really understand what they're trying to tell you. So I think
Yeah.
hearing this from someone like sort of the mid level would be like quite useful, and I think
Yeah.
hopefully it gives adds a lot of value.
Yeah, and I think just as the ending point is, you know, we don't want you guys to copy this step by step, maybe initially, but then
Yeah,
you always have to add on and refine it for yourself. And it's going to be different. Maybe you don't like a certain part of our process. Maybe
yeah,
in your demographic or your location, a certain step in our process, you know, won't work for your demographic or whatever. So just, you know, use this as a kind of skeleton and then add on top of it.
yeah.
Awesome.
I think that's a good outro. But
Yeah.
I think I'm looking at the stats on the channel. We have 231 subs. I saw we only had like 201 a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I think like we had like 200. I actually don't remember,
We
but we
had
did gain
I
a lot of
remember
subs
we
recently.
were like, oh, we have 201 subscribers. Yeah, we have
Yeah,
230. It's pretty good, man. And
mm,
I think the last episode is
awesome.
like by far our third most viewed one.
Yeah, and I
It's
think this
pretty
is
cool.
eventually going to reach number one probably. But
Hopefully,
yeah,
yeah.
guys, that wraps up this episode on how to or what was the episode? No, because okay, guys, we actually had a topic that
Different
we meant to talk
title.
about before, a different
Yeah, yeah,
title.
yeah.
So now I'm looking
This
at
is
it.
about
Yeah.
Webflow processes.
Okay, yeah, this is about workflow process. I'm looking at the
Yeah.
title, and the title was from the previous topic, so I do
Yeah.
apologize, guys. So yeah, hope you guys did enjoy this episode, which is about how, or you know, how you should run your workflow process from, you know, the initial touch
Yeah.
point
If
to
you have
launching the client site.
any questions or anything like that, just drop
Yeah,
in the comments. Hit the like. Gonna get 20
hit the like
likes. I
button,
don't
20
think
likes.
we're
Make
gonna
sure you
get
do
it,
that.
but hopefully we do.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thank
All
you very
right.
much for watching. Make sure you hit the like button and make sure you subscribe, and we'll catch you next week. Bye
All
bye.
right. Bye bye.